The Authors Forum exists to inspire success. We will talk with authors and others in the publishing industry to bring you essentials and advice. Dr. Veronica Esagui is your host for Authors Forum.
Welcome to the Authors Forum. I'm your host, Dr. Veronica Esagui, chiropractic physician in Westland, Oregon, and the author of the Scoliosis Self-Help Resource Book and Veronica's Diaries, The Journey of Innocence and Braving a New World. My guest today is Mr. Ron Talney, and he's the author of 5 books of poems. One of them, a very special one, is called A Secret Weeping of Stones, New and Selected Poems, and the newest book is quirky, fast-paced, satiric thriller, Nockers Up. Mr. Ron Talney. Am I saying your last name correctly?
That's correct.
Talney?
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Veronica.
I understand that this is a very interesting thing that I found out from reading about your books and your bio, that in 1985 your poem, Portlandia, was selected as the official dedication poem for the statue Portlandia, the second largest beaten copper statue in the U.S. and now a Portland landmark. Would you share with us what it was like to be chosen the poet for that statue?
Well, it was a great honor, and given the number of folks who sent in contributions to be considered, it was quite an honor for me. At the time, I was not sure what I was going to write because I saw the contest was publicized by the Oregonian, that they wanted to have a dedication poem just as the Statue of Liberty had a dedication poem. So, and I had never written a public poem before where I actually commemorate some public event on command, so to speak. And I was getting ready for a trip to Peru. So I didn't have much time. So I sat down and I wrote a few things and nothing was working very well. And then I remembered a poem that I had started but was unsuccessful in completing, a poem about my mother as she leaned down. She was a gardener and she was leaning down into the earth and so on. And I thought that vision of Portlandia as she leans down over her citizens was an appropriate one. And so I finished a poem using that, and I sent it in, and I went to Peru, and I came back and I was a winner. So.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
So Ron, would you share with us some of your literary background?
Well, I've been writing for many, many years. I started publishing in the mid-'60s and have published fairly consistently ever since. Initially, I was publishing poems, and I was publishing professional articles in professional journals of one sort or another. And then over the years, I branched on into personal essays, memoir pieces, and then in the 90s, I started writing some prose fiction. And as I've gotten more time into retirement, I've had blocks of time where I could do more fiction writing, and that's been kind of my focus in the last few years.
Because you are a retired attorney, and
Yes.
so now you're able to write a lot more, or were you writing just as much as when you were busy with your profession?
Well, I think I'm writing differently, because when I was writing as a poet, which I still do as well, I could do that off and on. I could jot things down, I could do my other work and still have that working in the background. I didn't need blocks of time. And but now that I'm retired, I do have blocks of time, and I can devote it to a more daily routine of writing. But I always remember William Carlos Williams, the great American poet of the 20th century, who was a practicing pediatrician for all of his adult life, and he would talk in his autobiography of how when the patient was with him, he was 100% with the patient. And when the patient was out the door, the typewriter came out and he was a poet. And he was able to compartmentalize his life that way. And I think I have done probably much the same, and I suspect you have as well,
Yes.
that ability to shift back and forth. But retirement's wonderful, and the ability to get up in the morning and sit down at the computer and write for whatever period of time I want is wonderful.
When did you retire?
I retired from active practice at the end of '96, but then I continued to work for nothing for another 10 years. I was working at that time for Marion Polk Legal Aid as a legal aid lawyer, and I continued to work with them on a pro bono basis and was doing political asylum work for various projects and so forth. So I've done a lot of immigration work and what have you. So I did that up until 2 or 3 years ago, and then I went inactive with the bar and have been writing full-time since then.
So did your years of law practice, did it impact your writing?
I think it did to some extent, because the kind of law that I always practiced was very people-oriented. And I was dealing with people usually in very dire circumstances for one reason or another. Mm-hmm. They were charged with crime, their marriages were falling apart, whatever it might be. There was some disaster going on in their lives. And I think that did impact my law practice to some extent, and my writing to some extent. I remember on one occasion in particular, I was representing a woman who was charged with the murder of her child, a 3-year-old girl. And I had a child about the same age at that time. And I worked on that case exclusively for about 6 or 7 months, preparing it for trial. And then for about a year after that, I was completely blocked. I could not write anything. And one day I happened to see a copy of the National Geographic and a photograph of Masada. Mm-hmm. And I was reading how at Masada, the Romans had laid siege to the zealots who were in Masada. And when it was apparent that the siege was going to be successful, the zealots and their families chose to kill themselves rather than fall into slavery with the Romans. And I realized that here were fathers who were killing their own children, mm-hmm. and for what they thought were good reasons. And I remember going to my office and sitting down and writing the first poem that I had written in a year and a half. And that kind of released the whole dam of blockage. But so there were impacts of my practice on the writing that I was doing, and probably the other way around as well.
So if I was going to point to Secret Weeping of Stones, mm-hmm. new and selected poems, do you have a particular poem that you'd like to read?
Well, I could read the poem that I wrote at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Okay. Thank you.
It's called The Children of Masada. And I should explain, if you have viewers who aren't familiar with Masada, it is a mesa out in the desert, Judean desert, on the Dead Sea. And it was where Herod the king had his summer palace at one time. And it was in ruins. And in the 1st century AD, by the Jewish zealots trying to overthrow the Roman Empire as it affected that area. When they were being defeated, they retreated to Masada, and they held out there for about 9 months. And then, as I say, when it became apparent that they were going to be overtaken, they chose to kill one another. Every father killed his own children, and then they drew lots to determine the order in which they would die. So this is called The Children of Masada. This is where the children died. The fortress of Masada stands witness to their deaths. Each father killed his own, and then drew lots until the perfect silence was obtained. Roman soldiers won the solitude, but took no slaves. They call me esoteric, but these deaths go on and on. Today a child still crawls these cliffs and beats his life out on the rocks below. I paint his twisted face into a grin, a photographic pose my camera can't endure, and watch bright flowers bursting from his chest. What place could live by such a code of stones and dust? Some day I'll dig in these remains and find what children cry when parents come with knives and hands to love them from the rock. No blood could really live this long, and yet I hear the soldiers march, their armor clanking closer in the desert air. Father, Father, love me with your spade, your club, your esoteric hands, and I will burst into the only victory we are.
And that is A Secret Weeping of Stones by Ron Talney. This is poetry, and this is, can you tell us a little bit about The Ghost of Deadman's Hollow?
The Ghost of Deadman's Hollow is a mystery story for young people. It takes place on the southwest Washington coastline, and it's about kids who spend the summer there. Their parents are school teachers and have the summer off, and they run a livery stable during the summertime for people to rent horses and ride on the beach. And so they all have horses, and they discover a smuggling operation, a drug smuggling operation on the peninsula. And that follows their adventures.
You have to get the book and find out what
That's
what
right.
happens.
I'm not going to tell you how it ends.
And what motivated you to write Nockers Up, a satiric thriller? I mean, this is quite opposite of your poetry, right?
It is. It's a far range. But sometimes you like to just write stuff for the fun of it. Mm-hmm. And that was writing something for the fun of it. That was actually a project of the National Novel in a Month Challenge. I don't know if your viewers have heard of that or not, but every November, people sit down and try to write a novel of at least 50,000 words in the month of November, and that is the challenge. They have a fabulous website. It's called NaNoWriMo, and so in 2009, I decided to take the challenge, and I wrote the first draft of Nockers Up in the month of November of 2009, and then I set it aside for a few months and picked it up again and wrote another draft, and then I put that aside for a while, and then I picked it up and did a third draft, and then I thought I've invested enough time in this, and so I finished it at that point. Eventually I was hooked up with Inkwater Press, and they said they were going to publish it, and here it is.
So can you give us also a summary of Nockers Up?
I can tell you a little bit about
Okay.
it. It's about a young woman who grew up in eastern Oregon in a small town, and she comes to the big city. She's actually living just on the outskirts of Oregon City, and she is a student by day in a very conservative, non-accredited college, but she works as a stripper at night in a bar called Nockers Up Town Bar and Grill, a fictitious bar here in Oregon City, I must add. Owned by Gordy Nockers and his wife Ophelia, and Candy is the dancer there, and Nockers Up is kind of a character-driven book rather than plot-driven in particular, but Candy's ambition in life is to be a writer of Christian romance novels, and so she has all of these conflicts in her life of being a stripper on the one hand and having this ambition on the other. And she gets a scholarship to attend a writing conference at Wallowa Lake in eastern Oregon. And she goes there for the summer, and she gets involved with an ex-boyfriend who is kind of a small-time criminal. And there is an emigre poet-writer at the conference, and who they believe erroneously had won a Nobel Prize for Literature with its $1 million honorarium. And so a bunch of folks decide to kidnap this fellow and hold him for ransom. And this is the gang that couldn't shoot straight. And everything that can go wrong goes wrong.